The plans for Auto Club Speedway to become a short track have been put on hold. Kyle Larson says he wants to bring back the prelude to the dream, and we're also going to talk about the Kyle Larson and Chase Elliott situation. What's going on, guys? It's Daniel, and welcome back to another video. We got a ton of NASCAR and other motorsports to discuss here today on the channel. Let's go ahead and just jump straight in those really quickly. We're going to go ahead and start off with some Tenant schedules that are coming up for later this year. First, let's take a look at the Talladega Tenant schedule as this is reported by Bob Pigers. So on Friday, you'll have ARCA practice and then Xfinity Series qualifying on Friday. Then on Saturday, you will have Cup qualifying and then ARCA and Xfinity Series race will both be on Saturday. And then on Sunday, you will have the Cup Series race. Then you've got the Dover Tenant schedule that's been released. And on Friday, you will see Xfinity Series practice and qualifying, followed by the ARCA East race late in the evening. And then on Saturday, you'll have the Cup practice and qualifying, and then you'll have the Xfinity Series race, and then you'll just have the Cup Series race. Now, both these Tenant schedules, if you've noticed, so basically practice qualifying are pretty much on the Saturdays, basically for Xfinity and Cup. And you also see those later in the year, and those are tentative schedules for Talladega and Dover. And now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Fury. As Fury has expanded their relationship with the SRX ahead of the 2022 season. SRX is powered by the Fury engines. Fury engines powers a lot of the chassis and the engines for the team. So really cool to see that they have basically continue to power and work with the SRX heading into this season. They've had a good relationship last year. For them to expand going into this year, I think this will be able to bring more cars into the SRX. In my opinion, I think this is really sick. Very awesome. I'm glad to see that Fury chassis continue to be working with the SRX heading this season. I'm very excited about that, to be honest with you. And now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Kyle Larson. As it was announced on Friday that Kyle Larson is partnering up with Flow Sports to host the Flow Racing Late Model Challenge at Volunteer Speedway on April 14th. This will take place, I think, right before Easter takes place. I think the week of Easter, this is when the event is going to take place. And what Kyle Larson is hoping is that this can bring Cup Series drivers to get some experience for the Cup Series race at Bristol. Kyle Larson has hosted multiple events, and he basically is a promoter at a track, and he and Brad Sweet are a promoter at a track. So for Kyle Larson to continue to work and try to promote events, I think is really awesome. And I think Kyle Larson probably racing in that race too. And of course, Kyle Larson is a really good race car driver. So I think he'll be a very big contender in that event. And I'm very happy to see that Kyle Larson is going to be able to promote an event coming up very soon. And now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're going to talk about the LA Coliseum. Now, it looks like the LA Coliseum is no longer got any sort of the track as the grass is pretty much back. The grass has been gone, basically is back. After basically only about 3 or 4 weeks before go, where the track was basically a racetrack, now it has become, once again, a football stadium. And it's definitely unfortunate. I wish the LA Coliseum was still around because it looked absolutely amazing and really cool. And definitely it's unfortunate that Nascar is going to lose a ton of money on that. But it is what it is. But man, the LA Coliseum looking like a football stadium once again, looking like it traditionally does. It definitely is unfortunate, but it is what it is. And it's definitely unfortunate, but it is what it is. And now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Bubba Wallace. As this past week, I think on Thursday or Friday, Bubba Wallace was on the Jimmy Kimmel Show. Now, very shockingly, Austin was not who won the Daytona 500, but Bubba Wallace was coming who finished runner-up in the Daytona 500. He was on the Jimmy Kimmel Show. They talked about a lot of things. I don't exactly remember, but they talked about quite a few things in that interview. Having a guy like Bubba Wallace who's really recognizable and has become probably the most recognizable driver in NASCAR on the Jimmy Kimmel Show, that is going to get a lot of eyes on the sport. Now, don't get me wrong, they probably should have gotten Austin Cindric on the show, considering Austin Cindric won the Daytona 500. But I do think that having a guy like Bubba Wallace on your show is really important. I think, like I said, I think Bubba Wallace is probably the most recognizable NASCAR driver that is out there currently at the moment. So I think it's good to see the Bubba Wallace on the Jimmy Kimmel Show. That's going to be really great for the sport. And I'm very happy to see that we got to see that Jimmy Kimmel Show. I think that's really awesome. Glad to see that we got to see Bubba Wallace on the Jimmy Kimmel Show. And now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode as we are talking about Ryan Vargas. Now, if you watched the NASCAR Xfinity Series race that took place on Saturday, which was a really crazy race, if you notice, Ryan Vargas was running up front, and then Ryan Vargas started falling back. You're wondering what happened to Ryan Vargas. Well, Ryan Vargas, and thank you, shout out to Brock Beer for basically posting this, but he reported that the transmission exploded in his hand. He said he didn't miss a shift, just exploded and slammed through the dash. He basically said that parts of the transmission and shifter kind of hit his finger, and he said, "I'm not hurt. I'm just really, really bummed and wants to have a really, really good one. It sucks what happened." That definitely is really, really unfortunate because Ryan Vargas actually was having another really, really strong run this week. He wasn't running up front and contending for the victory, but he was contending for a top 25. And the most important thing is he is okay after this issue because he could have gotten seriously hurt. We've seen drivers have the situation happen in the past. I think it happened last year. I think to Josh Blicky or another driver last year. So definitely really, really unfortunate that happened. But the good news is at least Ryan Vargas is not seriously hurt. And that's the most important thing is he's going to be able to continue racing in the next week and no more issues from that. So definitely really good to see Ryan Vargas okay. It's definitely unfortunate what happened right there. But hopefully we'll see him back at the track. And it's unfortunate what happened to Ryan Vargas in that situation with the transmission exploding. That definitely is really, really scary. And I'm glad to see that Ryan Vargas was not very hurt from that situation. And now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about College Racing. As College Racing says that they will appeal the 4-race suspensions to crew chief and his 2 pit crew members over the improperly mounted wheels and violations at Daytona, and reported later that they have that basically the suspension and penalties have been deferred until the inspection and stuff goes through. For those who watched the Daytona 500, basically they were handed a 4-race suspension because of the tire situation. Now, the thing that I did not agree with, I do agree with College Racing basically appealing this penalty because in my opinion, in their situation compared to the money team situation, it wasn't the whole tire came off. It was basically the outside curve of the wheel. Some of the wheel and parts in that car were still inside of the car. So I really never understood why College Racing got basically that big of a penalty when really they still had stuff in their car. And I do agree that the money team should have gotten a penalty, but I do not 100% agree that College Racing should have gotten a penalty. So I'm overall very, very happy that College Racing is going to go ahead and appeal this penalty. They need to do that because, in my opinion, they should not have been able to get a massive, massive penalty from that. And good to see that they are going to appeal this penalty because, like I said, I believe that they did not deserve the penalty they got. So good decision if they're going to appeal it, and it's good to see that they are going to appeal the major penalties. And now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're going to talk about Auto Club Speedway. Now, this is reported by Adam Stern yesterday before the race began. And he says that Dave Allen says that the Clash allowed us a platform to promote the sport in Los Angeles. There's nothing like taking the race to the fans. We may not see an immediate huge impact Sunday, but the larger impact is a long-term play. It opened eyes for the fans. If you actually take a look at the crowd, especially in this area, and I'm very surprised too, the crowd was almost sold out considering that there was a race at the Los Angeles Coliseum literally about 3 or 4 weeks ago. I'm definitely very, very shocked that we saw that big of a crowd. There were a lot of people saying that we weren't going to see a full-size crowd. But the crowd was jammed-packed. You had so many major celebrities that were there. Albert Pujols, Danny Trejo, Chuck D, I think, was there. A lot of people were at the racetrack. Matthew Stafford, Andrew Withrow. You had so many celebrities at the track as well. And I have not felt this much energy around the sport in a very, very long time, not to mention a really, really good race to go along with that. I think the sport is really on an uptick right now. And look, I know the LA market is a major in a big market, but I think long-term, it really is going to pay off for NASCAR fans. I think it really is. And the energy around the sport right now, especially right now, I think the NASCAR is going in a great direction. And I do think the future of the sport right now is extremely promising. So that's really, really awesome. And I think that it's going to pay off long-term from Auto Club. Again, that was the best race I've seen at Auto Club, and the energy around the sport right now, I think is absolutely awesome to see. So really happy to see that, and I'm glad to see the energy. I'm glad to see the Auto Club's future is looking really, really promising. And by the way, do not convert Auto Club into a half-mile track. We'll talk about that later, but do not do it. And now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode as we are talking about Tim Cindr. Tim Cindr was being interviewed at the St. Petersburg Grand Prix. We'll talk about it here in a little bit. St. Petersburg GP. And he says the Daytona 500 winning car has been taken out of the rotation, and Team Penske has leased J.J. Yeley's car as a backup for the number 2 on the West Coast. This really should not surprise anybody. It's been expected they were not going to be using their Daytona 500 winning car later this year. And it's very interesting they decided to take one of the NBM Motorsports cars. You really would never have seen that back in the day. But because these cars are basically even and stuff, you can go ahead and now take someone's backup car from another organization, especially if they're a Ford. And what they're expected to do is they're expected to put the 2 car that won the Daytona 500 what they're expected to do is they're expected to go ahead and put that car in the museum at Phoenix, and they're not going to use that car. And NASCAR, of course, said that they were basically going to let the teams, use this car later in the year. Well, the team decided, hey, we're not going to use the car, which is definitely really, really crazy. And it's crazy to also think that they were able to get J.J. Lee's backup car. So, in my opinion, definitely an interesting story that Tim Cindric is reporting right there. And pretty crazy, in my opinion, that Tim Cindric, and they're able to do that now. So, really cool, in my opinion, and absolutely crazy, to be honest with you. And now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Pato O'Ward. Now, Pato, basically, multimedia members are being asked about the future of Pato O'Ward, and McLaren says Pato O'Ward can't move to Formula 1 with McLaren for some time. Right now, we don't have a seat available. Lando is under a very long-term contract, so that seat is done. And Daniel, we have another couple years with him. It was also reported later that O'Ward is in a mix of drivers being considered for FP1s this year, and there apparently is an IndyCar driver that they not say that's also being considered for that as well. Now, Pato O'Ward, of course, currently drives the McLaren SMP, currently in IndyCar right now, of course, having a really strong year last year, and have a really good start at the year running up front, of course, until Scott McLaughlin get his first career IndyCar victory. Congratulations to him on that. But Pato O'Ward was up front in a lot of that race and had a three-stop strategy that kind of took him out. Now, Pato O'Ward, for a couple years, there was actually a development driver, I believe, for Red Bull, but in 2020, he came back to run with McLaren and had a really strong year with them. He just didn't get a win, but he was up front in many races in 2020, and last year scored, I think, 2 or 3 victories with McLaren. Now, they're absolutely correct. There really is no place for him to go because Lando Norris has a contract with McLaren right now through, I think, 2025 or 2026. And Ricciardo, he's got a few years with the team, and they're not probably going to get rid of Ricciardo anytime soon because Daniel Ricciardo got McLaren their first win in like 10 seasons. So they're not going to get rid of Daniel Ricciardo. And, of course, Lando Norris is a very young driver, but I think Lando, trust me to say this, I think he's going to win many, many races in Formula 1. When you have Lewis Hamilton giving a ton of praise to you, you know you're headed in the right direction for the future. So I think Pato O'Ward's future is probably not going to end up in Formula 1 anytime soon right now. And Pato O'Ward, in my opinion, he shouldn't go to Formula 1. He's done extremely well, and I think absolutely I want to see Pato O'Ward continue racing IndyCar instead of going to Formula 1. Maybe Andretti opens up a ride in the future. Perhaps maybe he gets considered for the Andretti F1 team in the future. But I do believe in the future we'll see Pat. I think it's going to be a long-term time before we see Pato O'Ward even take a dip in Formula 1. He almost got to Formula 1 a couple of years ago because he was development driver for Red Bull, but it never happened due to certain circumstances. So that situation, Pato O'Ward, I don't know if we're probably never going to see him in F1 again, but we're probably not going to see F1 anytime soon. It's definitely unfortunate, but we probably aren't going to see him, and unfortunately, in F1 in the near future. And now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode as we are talking about Robert Wickens. Now, basically, there was an article that came out about the 6 IndyCar drivers that are going to race in SRX. And one driver, very interestingly, that was in that article was Robert Wickens, as Robert Wickens looks like he is currently interested in racing in the SRX. Now, there was a rendering that came out very late, I think was on Friday night or Saturday morning, that came out saying Robert Wickens interested. And Robert Wickens quote tweeted and put a eyeball emoji out there, showing that it looks like Robert Wickens is currently interested in racing in the SRX. Now, for many of you who do not know Robert Wickens' story, Robert Wickens was involved in a horrific accident in 2018 at Pocono, where basically he lost mobility in his legs and basically lost mobility in his spinal cord and lost mobility and was not able to move. He's been going through rehab and training for the last years to get back, and he got back behind the wheel. He's still, of course, unfortunately, really can't walk at the moment, but he's able to get back behind the wheel in the Michelin Pilot Challenge and was able, I think, to finish in the 2nd position in the Michelin Pilot Challenge, 2nd or 3rd, which his story is absolutely incredibly inspiring. And there's a lot of talk that he could race in the main IMSA series this year. And Robert Wickens, I would love to see him race in the SRX. I think having him in the series would be absolutely incredible. And I think Robert Wickens is still to this day a very, very talented driver who still could get it done. So I really want to see him. I really want to see him in the SRX. I think it'd be very, very awesome. And I do hope he gets to come in the SRX. So I hope that he's one of the drivers that gets considered for the future. There are announcements coming later this week for the SRX for more drivers getting announced. You've got a ton of drivers already announced. Of course, Ryan Newman's joining the SRX this year. You got Ryan Hunter-Reay, Justin Newgarden, and amount of new drivers who are racing the series. And I do hope that we get to see him in the SRX very, very soon. I think that'd be really, really sick. And hopefully we'll see him in the SRX in the near future really, really soon. And now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Josh Berry versus Austin Hill. Now, Josh Berry and Austin Hill were involved in a wreck around, I think, 3 or 4 laps into the race. Josh Berry was pushing Austin Hill down the front stretch, I think around lap 3 or lap 4 in the race. And we saw Austin Hill, unfortunately, go back into the outside wall with a really, really bad push by Josh Berry. And he got put into the outside wall. And unfortunately, Austin Hill got a flat tire when he got into the outside wall and lost a ton of laps, went I think 2 or 3 laps down in this race, and never really got back into contention. I think he finished around 30th in the race, which is unfortunate. I think Austin Hill had a good enough car to finish in the top 10. Of course, after coming off winning the season opener in the Xfinity at Series Daytona, getting his first career Xfinity Series win, the next race does not go well. Now, Austin Hill went up to confront Josh Berry about it, but Austin Hill was not very happy. But I will say that they were able to shake hands after that. And then Josh Berry did talk in the media. He said that he apologized for the incident and said that I've never really done that. It's my inexperience. It was on me. It's my responsibility, and I take responsibility for the incident. Now, in my honest opinion, looking at the incident in this situation, Josh Berry definitely clearly is at fault. But again, it was not intentional what Josh Berry did. Josh Berry was just trying to give a bump trap to Austin Hill down the front stretch, and Austin Hill was pissed off at Justin Allgaier. I don't know why he was pissed off at Justin Allgaier. But going back to Josh Berry definitely was at fault, but it's not like Josh Berry intentionally wrecked Austin Hill. He was just trying to give him a bump draft down the front stretch. I think it was a little bit aggressive and way too early to do that. I would understand if it was a little later in the race if you're doing that. I totally get that and understand that. But at the same time, it was a little bit early to go ahead and be that aggressive. But I don't think that we're going to see much more come out of this. I think it's just definitely interesting. Austin Hill wasn't happy, but at the same time, Austin Hill has every right to be upset about the situation because, again, he probably would have had a good chance to contend for the victory at Auto Club. Probably could attend against guys like Cole Custer, Noah Gragson for the victory, but never got the chance because of that unfortunate situation. But it overall is what it is, and we'll probably see these two. I don't know if we'll see any confrontations from these two, but that'll be crazy for sure that we got to see crazy incidents from both those drivers, to be honest with you. And now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're going to talk about Mark Martin. Now, if you watched the NASCAR Cup Series race at home from Fox, you saw Mark Martin join the Fox Sports booth for a little bit. Mark Martin now, of course, has a beard for some reason, but Mark Martin was in the Fox Sports booth and was getting a little bit of insight. Of course, he was up in the Fox booth as along with Matt Kenseth for a little bit. And I watched Mark Martin be in the Fox Sports booth, and I have to say that Mark Martin did an incredible job in the Fox Sports booth. And then later that evening after race, he says that he had a lot of fun doing it, and he says that he might join the Fox Sports booth again for a little longer. I want to see Mark Martin in the Fox Sports booth. Mark Martin not only was really, really fun to listen to, but he brought so much insight and so much information to the Fox Sports booth and did such a really good job. And you could tell between the 4 people, Mike Joy, Clint Boyer, Matt Kenseth, and Mark, they had really, really good and awesome chemistry together, and they really gelled really, really well together. And I think that that was such fun to see Mark Martin bring that insight. He was really, really excited. He was speaking true words on there, saying that these cars are hard to drive. But he also said that these teams are still trying to figure out these cars, and they really haven't figured them out yet, which is one thing that's really, really fun about sport is these teams are still trying to figure out these cars and some of the issues that we'll get into later in this episode. But I do think that Mark Martin really brought a lot of insight, and I want to see Mark Martin get into the Fox Sports booth and do more commentary. He brought so much insight, so much information, and really made the broadcast, in my opinion, really, really fun. I think Fox had their best broadcast, at least on the Cup side of things, in a long time. It was really fun to listen to and really, really fun to watch, and I want to see Mark Martin back in the Fox Sports booth again. Can we pledge to get Mark Martin in the Fox booth on a full-time basis? Because I think Mark Martin, to this day, could still do a really, really good job. I know he's too old probably now to get into a car. He's like 63 years old. Let's see him how pulls a Morgan Shepherd. But I want to see Mark Martin do some more commentary at Fox. I think he did a really, really awesome job, and I do hope that we could see Mark Martin in the Fox Sports booth a lot more, too. I want to see Matt do some more commentary, too, but I really want to see Mark Martin do some commentary in the future. I think he could do a really, really solid job in the Fox Sports booth, and like I said, we'd see Mark Martin in the Fox Sports booth in the future. And now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're going to talk about Andretti F1. Now, we've been wondering about what engine package Andretti F1 is going to use. Now, they're going to be basically based in the UK. They're going to be building a lot of stuff in Indianapolis, but they're going to have a home base in the United Kingdom. And like I said, we've been wondering what is the engine they're going to use. Well, fellow motorsports YouTuber David Land got to have an interview with Mario Andretti. And the engine that they are going to be powered by is Renault. And they are also working on potentially building a sports car as well with Alpine right now. And they're looking to have a relationship and a technical alliance with Alpine F1. Now, like I said, Renault currently has Alpine F1. And last year, Alpine F1 had one of their biggest seasons up to this point, picking up a victory with Esteban Ocon and also got a podium at one point with Fernando Alonso. Now, of course, Renault is not one of the top teams right now, one of the top manufacturers right now. You look at some of the other manufacturers that are really, really good right now. You look right now at Mercedes, you look at Ferrari, you look at McLaren, you look at Red Bull, you look at Honda. Those are some of the best manufacturers. That being said, though, remember, there are new regulations coming in the sport, and I do think that Renault is going to improve. And you have to remember that if Andretti does officially get improved into the sport, we're going to probably see them be a little bit more competitive because I think Renault is actually going to get their stuff together. And I think that they are going to be a little bit more competitive heading into the season. And like I said, with Andretti Formula 1 and their future and stuff, I think that they are doing it right, in my opinion. They're not just jumping into Formula 1. Remember that US F1 team that was going to try to show up in 2009 and Kyle Busch was being considered for that back at that time. I think that Andretti F1 is making the right moves right now. They're making good decisions, and the FIA will hopefully approve them. And a lot of teams are welcoming them, and they've got the money. Remember, Andretti F1 has the $200 million entry fee that they're going to need to get into Formula 1. So in my honest opinion, I do think that it's going to happen. I think that they will get approved, and we're going to probably see them use Renault engines. And again, they're working also on the sports car program as well. The thing I'm intrigued to see as well is when they do get it, how competitive they will be. And the other big thing, too, is what drivers are they going to get, which I think they're going to get American drivers to get in their cars. I think they're going to choose Colin Herta, and I think that they're going to go with either Kyle Kirkwood or Logan Sargent right now. I think Logan Sargent would be a good choice because Logan Sargent is in the Formula 2 right now, and I don't think that we're going to see Nicholas Latifi and Alex Albon leave Williams anytime soon. So really cool to see that, and it was cool to see that Renault is going to be powering the engines for Andretti Formula 1's organization. And now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode as we are talking about the tire issues. Now, if you've been watching the weekend, and let's talk about racing. Racing was absolutely incredible. But there has been one major issue with these next-gen cars, and it has been the tire issues. Now, if one of the biggest things about these cars is that these tires, there's one thing about these cars that are different when it comes to the tires. The difference is this year is compared to many years in the past, there's no inner liner. So if you get a flat tire and you can't move the car, you are stuck. And unfortunately, because of that, you end up losing a ton of laps. Now, one thing is NASCAR is fully aware of this situation. They are aware, and they're currently working on a solution for these flat tires. And we've already seen a lot of drivers have issues with these flat tires. We saw Vargas lose multiple laps because of this and didn't get to finish his qualifying lap because of it. We've seen William Byron have flat tire problems in qualifying. Chase Elliott also, he had a flat tire problem. We saw Josh Wickens lose multiple laps. Kyle Busch, I think, lost multiple laps because of it. And Christopher Bell, he lost around 4 or 5 laps because of it and fell out of a contention because of this. Like I said, in my opinion, this is the only flaw with this car right now. Everything else about this car, I absolutely love. But this tire situation has to absolutely be addressed and absolutely needs to be fixed. It has to be fixed. Something needs to be done. And NASCAR is looking at trying to make a solution. And to me, the only really big solution that you can do is you need to, instead of putting these guys up in a tow trucks, again, one of the things that the drivers complain about is because there really is no tow line on these cars, you can't really bring these cars back to the road because they get damaged, so they end up losing a lot of time, end up losing a ton of laps. There is no reason a driver's race should end because of a flat tire, especially with how loose these cars are and how sometimes they're unpredictable and really hard to tell if they're going to basically unpredictable, sometimes undrivable. It is very difficult to really see what they can do. But in my opinion, they need to be able to bring, what they need to do is get people that have training when it comes to jacking the cars up, bring them out there and get the tires changed. Give them like some rain tires or some tires that will get them back to pit road, and then you can take those tires out so they don't lose 4 or 5 laps. There's no reason, in my opinion, that we should be seeing drivers lose 4 or 5 laps because of these tire issues. That's one thing that needs to be addressed. Like I said, everything else about this car, I absolutely love, and I think it's absolutely perfect. It just, this is the one kink that's going to get fixed. And I do think that NASCAR will fix this problem, and I do not see this being an issue long-term down the road. But this has to be addressed 1,000%. Because if they don't address this could be a major problem that creeps up in NASCAR's future. And it's going to get very annoying for the fans very, very quickly. So I really do hope and pray that they do fix the situation. It looks like they are looking at a future situation, looking at something in the future to kind of fix these problems. I hope it gets addressed because it has to be addressed and it needs to be fixed very, very soon and very, very quickly, to be honest with you. Now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're taking a look at a quick paint scheme. As revealed just a few minutes ago, we're taking a look at Christian Eckes' 2022 curb scheme that we're going to see this weekend at Las Vegas. I like this paint scheme a lot. I love the gray, and I also like the black number. I think that's one thing they really, really good job on it. Great sponsor utilization. I love this paint scheme a lot, and I'm definitely looking forward to this paint scheme. See this paint scheme out on the racetrack this weekend at Las Vegas Motor Speedway, almost at Texas. Love this paint scheme a lot. I'm looking forward to seeing on the racetrack this weekend at Las Vegas. And now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode as we are talking about NASCAR's next TV deal. This morning it was reported by Adam Stern that teams are likely to ask for a bigger split of the next TV pie, and they hired a media consultant ahead of talks with NASCAR. It was also then quoted that said the sport is a sleeping giant, but from the team ownership side, it's very sponsor dependent and we need to address it. I 1000% agree with this, that NASCAR is a sleeping giant and sponsor needs to be there. And I also 100% agree that NASCAR there needs to be the teams and the drivers need to be able to get more of the ownership stake when it comes to the TV deal. Currently, with the current TV deal right now, I think the tracks get 65% of the deal, NASCAR gets 10%, and I think the drivers get 25% of the purse. That needs to change because NASCAR is very sponsor dependent compared to other racing sports and other sports and motorsport in general. NASCAR is a very, very big sport when it comes to sponsorship, and you need sponsors to be able to race. And one of the biggest issues is the tracks get 65% of the TV deal. And I'm sorry, the racetracks should not be able to get that big of a pie. I think what needs to happen is I think 50% needs to go to the track. I think drains the drop from around 65% down to maybe 50%, and the teams need to be able to get 40 to 45% of the deal. NASCAR gets a little bit of that money. I think the teams need to be able to get a ton more of it because, again, that would, one, help these teams, and especially the parity of the field, how close the field is, at least on the Cup side of things right now, and with sponsors being so dependent, it needs to happen to where the teams are able to get more money. I know NASCAR probably won't budge as much, but these teams really need to be able to get more money. And not just the charter teams, but the unchartered teams as well need to be able to get more of the piece of the pie as well. The racetracks should really be focusing on making the racing experience better, not just focusing on the money they get from the TV deal, if that makes any sense. So in my opinion, when it comes to this next NASCAR TV deal, they are going to have, in my opinion, what I hope is that they're able to get more of that piece of the pie, and the drivers and the teams are able to get it, especially when it comes to ownership side of things, because you need the teams and the drivers to be around the sport. And if you don't start giving them more money than they deserve, then there will be major, major issues right there. So in my opinion, when it comes to the next NASCAR TV deal, it needs to happen to where the teams are able to get a bigger piece of that pie, and I think this is going to be very, very important going down the road. So hopefully we'll see these NASCAR teams get more big piece of the pie. They're in negotiations for that. We're expecting more when it comes to the TV deal coming very, very soon. They're saying that talks and negotiations are expected to start here in next year. I just hope the teams and the drivers are able to get more of that bigger piece of the pie, and they're able to get more sponsorships, to be honest with you. And now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode because we're talking about the prelude to the dream. Now, Kyle Larson was being interviewed by the media on Saturday and was asked a ton of questions. And Kyle Larson did say to media that he wants to recreate the prelude to the dream, as there is a whole generation who were never able to participate in the event. Oh my goodness, the Prelude to the Dream. For those of you who do not know what the Prelude to the Dream is, the Prelude to the Dream was this major racing event that took place from 2005 to 2012. Kenny Wallace won the event in 2005. Tony Stewart won the event 3 times, I think 2006, 2008, and 2009. We saw, I don't remember who won in 2011, but in 2007, we saw Carl Edwards go to victory, and in 2012, we saw Kyle Busch go to victory lane. The Prelude to the Dream was this event. They brought drivers from all different forms of motorsports, whether it was NHRA. They also brought drivers from the world of Outlaws. They brought drivers from the late model series, and they also brought drivers from NASCAR as well and IndyCar to compete in this event. It was a very, very successful event that took place for those 7 to 8 years, and we saw so many great and incredible drivers come in, and it ran for charities as well. 6 drivers were on each team in charity, basically the charity, and whoever won, that would go to a certain charity. Like I said, the Prelude Dream is such a successful event. Now, the reason we don't have the event anymore is because of the truck series that took place from 2019 to 2013, 2019, but that event is no more of a thing. Kyle Larson, of course, is of course promoting that Flow Racing Media event that we talked about earlier in the episode. But Kyle Larson is someone who wants to bring that kind of back for a new generation of drivers. Just think about all the drivers that you could bring in from different forms of motorsports and all the different crossover stuff that is happening right now. You can get drivers in IndyCar. I mean, just the most recent winner, Scott McLaughlin. You could somehow maybe bring Lewis Hamilton to run this event. This would be huge, and imagine where it could be. Now, where could it could be happen? Maybe I-55 Raceway. That could be a racetrack that you could definitely have the prelude to the dream. Maybe Tony Stewart lets Kyle Larson once again run it at Eldora Speedway. You know, Eldora Speedway, Tony Stewart owns, and Tony likes Kyle Larson a lot. So definitely that would be a great track to have it. But the Prelude to the Dream is such a successful event that I really want to see it return. I think if for Prelude to the Dream, absolutely, if once it returned, I think it needs to happen. So I do hope it happens. I hope the Prelude to the Dream can make its turn to NASCAR in the future, especially with the success of the Prelude to the Dream, how successful it was for so many years, and the fan turnout, not to mention, and the excitement around it, especially with how successful is that one day where everything happened. And I watched that event back in 2010, everything in general. And oh my God, I know it was pay-per-view, but oh my God, I did not waste my money. It was such an incredible event, and it was fun to watch. I watched the race back in 2010, and seeing Jimmy Johnson and all those drivers in that event compete and contend was so fun to watch, and drivers had so much fun with it. They were really, really excited about it, and I do hope we get to see the Prelude to the Dream come back in the future. I think the event could be really, really successful long-term down the road. And yeah, I really want to see the Prelude to the Dream return. I really do. I think it'd be fun for the fans, and I do hope that we get to see the Prelude to the Dream return to NASCAR in the future. And now we're going to go ahead and jump on to the first of three major stories of today's episode, as we're talking about the Chicago Street Race. Now, we've talked about Chicago Street Race kind of many times on the channel, as NASCAR does want to do a NASCAR Street Race in Chicago. Now, we kind of had those talks stall out, but recently reports have picked up, and this is reported by Adam Stern, that NASCAR remains in talks to bring a street race to Chicago, and their working goal is to hold an event for the first time next season in 2023 per sources. Now, these talks are still going to be complicated and amid negotiations. They still going to be complicated, and the deal could fall through. Like I said, we talked about this on the channel multiple times about NASCAR looking to hold a street race in Chicago. NASCAR is trying to expand to different markets. Look at the success of the Los Angeles market right now. How many people were able to go to the Los Angeles Coliseum and show up at that racetrack, and especially going to Auto Club, and how many people showed up to that race. They're looking to expand into the Chicago market as well, considering they have not raced at Chicago since 2019 season, because we didn't go there the last couple of years. We didn't, like I said, we didn't have a race the last couple of years at Chicago and Speedway. Now, I want Chicago and Speedway to return as much as you guys, but when it comes to markets and stuff, you have to be able to adapt and go there. And NASCAR, of course, also with the next-gen car, NASCAR wanted to wait. Now, NASCAR had talked about maybe putting a race in 2022 in Chicago Street Course, but because of the fact that it was so late and when they were doing these negotiations, the deal fell through. We've seen the renderings on iRacing, and the track looks really, really cool. It's a very tight track, so it's going to be very, very difficult to pass. But I think we could see some really, really good racing. Now, the very big important thing, when it comes to street race, what you're doing here is you're bringing it to the fan. You're bringing the racing to the fans. Fans don't have to spend thousands of dollars to go to these races. You can bring it right to the city, and what you can do is you can have fans come out there that are not NASCAR fans, and they don't have to spend thousands of dollars traveling to these events. You could bring it to the city, and very similar to what Nashville did, you could bring it back to the city, and you don't have to have fans traveling thousands and spending thousands of dollars bringing it out. Now, the big thing, of course, is how will the racing be? That's one thing that's to be determined. Again, the iRacing that happen. We'll probably see a lot of wrecks when it does happen. We may not see a lot of wrecks with it, but of course, one of the most important things is not just the fact the racing needs to be good, but also if the racing is good, because Chicago is a town when it comes to racing. They're a town that's can be very, very adamantly angry with fans. If they don't like something, they're going to be very adamant about that. That is how Chicago fans are. But if the event is very, very successful, the racing's great, and the fans have an enjoyable experience, that will be great. What NASCAR is doing right now, what they're looking at toward the future right now, I think is really, really promising. They've been making some really, really big strides and some big moves. They're talking about going to Mexico City. They're talking about going to Denver. They're talking about going to a lot of different areas currently right now. And that's really good for the future of NASCAR, looking at the future and what they're doing. I think is a really, really great thing. And you look at what, especially with the Chicago Street Race they're looking at doing next year, NASCAR would not have done this under the Brian France administration. And I know that NASCAR has made a lot of mistakes, but you've got so much happiness around the sport and so much buzz. And having a street race will get NASCAR a lot of media and a lot of national attention. So I really do hope that we see a Chicago Street Race. I know a lot of people are not big fans of street racing, but bringing it to the city is so much more important than really is important. is so much important to bring it to the city. So in my opinion, I really do hope it happens and the Chicago street race does happen. I think it'll be great for the sport. So hopefully we do get to see a Chicago street race in the future, and I think it needs to happen because I think if the event, because I think it could be very, very successful, and I do hope that we'd see a Chicago street race here next year. To be honest with you, I hope it does happen because I think it'd be great for the fans, and I think that bringing it to the fans is really, really important. And now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Auto Club Speedway. Now, we talked about this back, I think, about 2020. The NASCAR had been looking to convert Auto Club Speedway to the short track, but those plans got denied. And basically, very recently, Fox Sports reported that the plans to make Auto Club Speedway short track are on hold, and it will not be a short track in 2023. Now, had the racing not been good with the next-gen car yesterday, I would have said we need to make it a short track. But the racing this weekend, not just in the Cup Series, but the Xfinity Series race as well, was absolutely amazing. Now, we've already, I kind of previewed it just a second ago. They were looking to make Auto Club a short track in 2021, but the COVID-19 pandemic really came around in California, and they decided to postpone those plans for 2021 to not have a race Cup Series as Auto Club. Because of that, in 2021, because of not having a race, they decided to give the fans one last race in 2022 on the 2-mile track. But because of how much inflation is growing, how much costs have grown, especially in California, how much price have increased, how much real estate and that kind of stuff has increased, those plans have been put on hold, at least it looks like for 2023, and it looks like for the near future. Now, like I said just a second ago, I would have said if had the racing not been good, I would have said, yes, we need to convert to a short track. But especially after the racing we saw this weekend, we do not, and I repeat, we do not need to make this track a short track. The racing was absolutely amazing. If there is a track that needs to convert to a short track, it's Texas Motor Speedway. I don't know. I know we've not had a race with the next-gen car there, but I don't think the racing is going to be great, even with the next-gen car. But Auto Club Speedway provides so much good racing. You have so many passes. You've got 3 or 4 wide grooves of racing, and just some of the best racing out there. We saw the best race in Auto Club history, in my opinion. We saw the best race ever. Maybe you can argue maybe the 2015 IndyCar race probably was better, but we saw so much incredible racing. You could pass, you get side by side, get so many good runs, so many different lanes that are available, and you don't get that at a lot of different tracks. So I really do not want to see Auto Club ever converted to a short track. And there's another track that's not too far, I believe, from Auto Club Speedway called Irwindale Speedway. If you renovate that track and get that track sorted up, you can have a short track race and you can keep Auto Club its own. Plus, you can expand to Irwindale Speedway and have another race in California and bring fans out there. And it's also cheaper, but I do not think Auto Club Speedway needs to convert to a short track, especially after the excitement of the event and how successful it was and how many fans really enjoyed it and excitement around it. I do not want to see Auto Club become a short track. Do not make it a short track. The racing was so incredible. It was so fun to watch. I enjoyed it as a fan, and I hope that the fans enjoyed it too. It was so fun to watch this weekend. Both races were not only incredible, but absolutely amazing. And if they convert Auto Club to a short track, man, in the future, a lot of fans are not going to be happy. Now, like I said, at the time when they announced it, I thought it was really, really cool, and the renderings and the track look absolutely amazing. But especially after the racing we saw, we do not need to convert Auto Club to a short track. So I hope they decide to keep those plans on hold for a long-term future. Eventually they are going to have to repay the tracks. Again, the track, I think the surface is 25 years old. But they are going to, like I said, they're going to have to repay the track in the future. They're going to have to. They don't need to reconfigure the track. If you have to, just repay the track. Don't reconfigure it. That's my opinion on that situation. And yeah, absolutely 100%. I'm very, very excited for the future of Auto Club. The racing was absolutely amazing. And do not convert Auto Club to a short track because the racing was way too good for the track to be converted, in my honest opinion. And now we're going to go ahead and jump on to the final major story of today's episode, as we are now talking about Chase Elliott versus Kyle Larson. Teammates, getting into it. Now, if you watched the NASCAR Cup Series race yesterday, Chase Elliott already had issues early in the race. He was actually leading the race early and actually went multiple laps down because his tire basically spun out, had basically a broken toe link, and went back down to pit road. But because there were so many cautions in this race, Chase Elliott was able to get back up the lead lap, and he started driving up to the front. Now, during the race restart, around 34, 35 laps ago, Chase Elliott actually had a really, really good pit stop. Kyle Larson, I believe, won the race off pit road. But Chase Elliott had a I think Chase actually won the race off pit road. But then Kyle Larson got a really, really good restart. Chase Elliott lost a couple spots on the restart. Then Chase Elliott gets this huge run down the front stretch and tries to go to the outside of Kyle Larson instead of helping Kyle Larson get the lead. He goes to the outside and tries to go outside of Kyle Larson. Then Kyle Larson says focusing on Joey Logano. He goes up and puts up a really, really bad block on Chase Elliott and pushed Chase Elliott in the wall. Chase Elliott was not very happy on the radio. He was basically saying, I don't care who wins this race. He was not very happy. And then when he saw Kyle Larson, he went down to almost, I think, try to wreck Kyle Larson and try to hold Kyle Larson up, trying to cost himself the victory. And then with 9 laps to go, or 10 laps to go in this race, we saw some controversy where Chase Elliott spun on the backstretch. Now, Chase Elliott's going to say that he did say that he did have a broken toe link, and he said he did not intentionally wreck him, but he was literally spinning out on purpose. Come on. I think he intentionally was spinning out, trying to cost Kyle Larson a victory. He was not very happy, and in my opinion, he was adamantly right on that situation. Now, Kyle Larson later in the evening spoke to the media, and he says that he was not intentional what he did. Basically, was not intentional getting into Elliott. He said he didn't realize that Chase Elliott was there, and he felt bad for Chase. And he says, considering Chase Elliott to bounce back, he said he felt bad for it. He did say that they will talk about the situation and that they are going to try to sort out the situation between themselves. They're going to try to sort out, talk about it. He said Chase Elliott's probably going to be mad at him, which is absolutely fine. And Kyle Larson said that he really felt bad for the situation. He did not want to wreck Chase Elliott and put him in the wall. He just put out a bad block. He basically explained his side and said that. Then later that evening, Tyler Mon got on the Twitter, and he says that he basically said that today I made a mistake. I will take full responsibility for what happened on the track today. I was worried about the 22 and not the 9. It was a blank call on me, and it had nothing to do with Kyle. When I look at the situation very, very clearly when it comes to the wreck and situation and the incident, Kyle Larson is definitely at fault for the situation. And this is not the first time that Kyle Larson has kind of caused an incident this year. You go back to the Busch Light clash earlier this year with him and Justin Haley. But unlike the Justin Haley incident where it was intentional, Kyle Larson misjudged it. He made a big mistake. He tried to put a block on Chase Elliott. It was a very, very bad block and a very bad call. But it's also on the spotter too. It's not just on Kyle, but it's also spotter too. And Tyler Mon here is taking a lot of responsibility. And Kyle Larson misjudged it. It was an accident, but people saying that Chase Elliott has no right to be upset because he's caused other incidents in the past and done that same thing too. You're absolutely wrong because Chase Elliott absolutely has a right to be upset with Kyle Larson in that incident. And Chase Elliott, like I said, has a really legitimate reason to be upset for what happened right there. Because Chase Elliott was up front, had bounced back from an issue, and was in contention for the victory, and we had a really, really good run justifiably. Had the line right there, and Larson put a bad block on him. There's no doubt about that, but it's not like Kyle Larson intentionally wrecked him. And I've seen a lot of Chase Elliott fans, too, especially on social media, that have been a little bit out of line. Someone posted on social media, I think it was on Instagram, saying that Kyle Larson gets into Cashman's like it did in 2013. Look, I get that a lot of Chase Elliott fans are upset about the situation. I totally understand your frustration, and you have a right to. But Kyle Larson did not intentionally wreck him. And for me, those are my two favorite drivers. Kyle Larson and Chase Elliott are my two favorite drivers. So I'm just here like, I've seen both these fan bases fight. It's just like, can we get along for 1 second? You know what I mean? We don't need to see toxicity. Can we not ruin a great race because we're mad? But I 100% understand why Chase and Kyle Larson met. And they're probably going to talk it out. And maybe we'll see if they said, if it becomes more of an issue, we see more instances between these two. We might see some escalation. Now, the president of Hendrick, I don't remember the guy's name. I think it was Andrew Mercian or somebody. I don't remember the guy's name. He did say that they're going to talk about it and said that they're going to try to not make it escalate. Larson said that too, that they're not going to try to escalate it. And what I'm starting to notice too between these two, this seems very similar to a Kyle Larson versus Chase Elliott feud. It's very similar to that kind of feud, and I really think that we may be seeing something similar to that. Again, I don't think it's gotten to that point, very similar to Jeff Gordon, Jimmy Johnson feud, when those two were kind of still in the prime of their careers and still were up front contending for victories. And Jeff Gordon in 2010, remember Jeff Gordon getting really mad at Jimmy Johnson back in 2010, how angry he was really getting mad at Jeff Gordon was getting mad at Jimmy Johnson because Jimmy Johnson won his championships, and Jeff Gordon not won a championship since Jimmy Johnson had gotten into the 40A car. Overall, like I said, in my honest and sincere opinion, I think, again, looking at the incident, I think Kyle Larson definitely is at fault for the situation. But again, Kyle Larson did not intentionally wreck Chase Elliott. It was just a bad misjudgment call that Kyle Larson made. It was his fault. And he's made a couple of mistakes this year, no doubt about it so far this year. But Kyle Larson's the guy who won the race and went to victory lane. Kyle Larson, of course, he was smiling because he won the race. But again, he didn't intentionally wreck Chase Elliott. So I do hope that no more comes out of this. And I do hope this situation does get cleared up. And hopefully we see, because the team meetings are probably going on as we speak right now. Hopefully the situation is sorted out very, very soon and very, very quickly. But we may see more rivalries from this too. And I would absolutely love to see more issues from these two. I think it'd be very, very funny to see teammates going against each other. I think it's reliable saying, why are we blowing this out of proportion? Well, it's teammates getting into each other. We saw people blowing out of proportion with Blaney and Austin Center, especially with Blaney's radio after it. But it is what it is. And I think that the situation will sort itself out in the future. So, anyway, that is for today's NASCAR Motorsports News video. I want to thank you guys for watching. Please subscribe to the channel to notifications be notified when a video does go live on my channel. Follow me on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram, and support me on pages on list schedule below for that, and comment your thoughts on today's video. What are your thoughts about the Kyle Larson and Chase Elliott situation? Do you think that Kyle Larson was every right to be? Do you think Chase Elliott has every right to be upset? Who do you think is at fault for it? Let me know in the comments below. And what are your thoughts about Auto Club not becoming a short track? And what is your thoughts about that? Let me know in the comments below. I've got some videos that are coming on the way. You're going to see the entry list most likely tomorrow on my channel for the Las Vegas race of Enzo 400. And later this week, you'll also see pics on my channel along with some other videos that I've got coming out here on the channel really, really soon. So anyway, like I said, I want to thank you guys for watching today's video. And I'll see you guys next time for some more great, awesome NASCAR and other motorsports content on the channel like this. Take care, everybody.